So first of all, before we look at adding and subtracting, just a reminder on place value, because as we go through adding and subtracting decimals and later on to multiplying and dividing as well, we're going to have a lot of questions where it says round to the nearest whatever. And so when we do that, we got to make sure that we know all of the place value. So before the decimal point, that is the ones. If it ever says to round to the nearest whole number, that is what we round to. So ones or also the nearest whole number. Right after the decimal point, I'll let you all tell me, is the tenths. And then it just continues on. So tenths and then hundredths, thousandths, and then 10,000ths. So that's just a quick review of place value. Remember, when rounding, you always look at the number after the spot that you're rounding to. So if it says to round to the nearest tenth, you look in the hundredths spot and then follow these two rules. If the number is 5 or greater, you're going to round the tenths up 1. If it is 4 or less, you keep that tenths spot the same. And that's the same for hundredths or thousandths or 10,000ths. Or even whole number, you look at the tenth spot and you see what you need to round to. So especially when we start multiplying and dividing tomorrow and Thursday, that is when we're really going to have to deal with place value. So make sure that we understand that. With adding and subtracting, most of the time, whatever they give us is just the numbers that are going to be there. So when adding and subtracting decimals, really it's not going to be much different from normal adding or subtracting. The biggest thing is to make sure the decimal points line up with each other. So the numbers in the hundredths spot should line up with each other. The number in the tenths spot, the decimal point should line up. The ones, the tens, the hundreds, all of those should line up with one another. If one number is bigger than the other, then you're going to add zeros to fill any places that are not filled. So once we've lined everything up, we just add and subtract like normal, and your decimal point comes straight down in your answer. So you don't have to count any spaces or anything like that. It just comes right straight down in your answer. One other thing I'll add, the positive and negative rules stay the same. If they were the same for fractions, they're going to be the same for decimals as well. And that holds for adding and subtracting as well as multiplying and dividing. So all the rules for positives and negatives are still going to be the same for decimals, and that's really, once again, like with fractions, that's really where we go one step further with decimals, is that you're going to be thrown in those different positive and negative questions. Okay, so let's look at our examples. First one there, 13.6 plus 17.8. This is nice because we just have to write them both out. It's going to be lined up for us. And then add just like normal. Make sure your decimal point comes straight down in your answer. And we should get 31.4. 31.4. She can sit behind you, Tatum. One does. All right, for our second one thing that's really important. So first of all, remember we're going to change the subtraction sign to addition, and then make this positive 22.9 a negative 22.9. If one's positive and one's negative, remember we subtract them. Something important when we are subtracting is to make sure the bigger number goes on top. Make sure the bigger number goes on top. Otherwise, your subtraction's going to be messed up. It's not going to work out how it should. And we know this is where those positive and negative rules come into play, because even though we're going to do 22.9 minus 14.86, 22.9 is the bigger number. So we know that our answer is going to be negative, because the bigger number is negative. And then just subtract like usual. So 22.9 minus 14.86. And notice there is nothing above that 6. So this is where we're going to put a 0 above it. Make it 22.90. And then we'll go ahead and subtract like normal. So we'll have to change that 0 to a 10. Change the 9 to an 8. When we're done subtracting, we get 8.04. So our answer is going to be negative 8.04. Negative 8.04. For our third one, we can just keep this in the same order, 139.3 minus 45.679. This is where it's important to make sure your decimal points are lined up. So that 4 is going to go under the 3 in 139. And we're going to have to add 2 zeros after our 0.3 there up top. If we change this first 0 to a 10, the second 0 needs to be changed to a 9, because we had to take 1 away from it. And then the biggest thing is just to make sure when you're changing everything up top that you don't get confused, stay organized. We changed this to a 9, so we got to change this to a 2. And then we'll just kind of keep going down the line there. So once we're done, we should get 93.621. $93.621. Any questions? Biggest thing is to make sure you keep those positive and negative rules in check still. Just with decimals, sometimes it's easy to get off track, to get unorganized, so make sure that you stay organized with your work. You guys go ahead and do the next 3 on your own. The next 3 on your own. Okay, for this first one, actually, first of all, for all three of them, as I was walking around, the biggest mistake I'm seeing is getting the positives and negatives confused. Something's getting mixed up, you end up doing the wrong thing. If it's a positive plus a negative, are we going to add them or subtract them? Subtract them. Our bigger number is positive, 25, and so our answer is going to be positive. So all you've got to do is subtract these two numbers. So 25.67 minus 24.038. Add a 0 after that 7. And then we'll just subtract like usual. And we should get 1.632. 1.632. Okay, this was the one that I saw that was most missed. What do we need to do with this subtraction sign? Jeff? Make an addition sign, and what else do we need to do then? Make the 3.21 a negative 3.21. If we have a negative plus a negative, do we add or subtract the two numbers? We add them, right? They're the same sign. So we're actually going to do 7.803 plus 3.21. We're actually going to add them. So a lot of people subtracting them. Is our answer going to be positive or negative? What's the bigger number? Bigger number is negative, right? So our answer is going to be negative as well. So add these and then make your answer negative. It's going to be 11.013, so our answer is negative 11.013. Negative 11.013. And for our last one here, change the subtraction sign to addition and change the negative 15.9021 to a positive. So really, we're going to add these two numbers. We're actually going to add them when we change everything that we need to. Make sure that you write everything correctly as well. This one's tricky because the numbers are so similar. And then we'll just add them like normal. Look what I did. Told you guys to make sure you put the decimal in the right spot, and I messed it up. Alright. So we should get 31.8231. 31.8231. Well, like I said, your all's addition and subtraction is correct. You guys know how to do that. Biggest thing is the positives and negatives, so make sure that you don't get those two confused when you're working with them. Any questions on these three before we move on? Okay, let's look at a word problem here. The Paige was measuring how much taller she got over 2 years. The first year that she grew 4.62 centimeters. The second year she grew 7.7. How much taller did she get altogether? What word tells us what operation to use? What's a word there that tells us what we need to do? Fiona?
Altogether.
Altogether means what?
To add.
To add them, yes. So altogether means we add. So we're going to take 7.7 and 4.62 and add them together. So altogether, she grew 12.32 centimeters. What's another word that would need to add? Altogether. Another word. Oh, I'm sorry, not for this question, just in general. Like if you see this word, it means to add the two together for everything that you have together. Starts with a T. Total, yes. If you see total, maybe it said what's the total amount she grew, that would mean to add as well. Okay? You all go ahead and finish this last one. I'll let you do it on your own. Okay, for this one, what operation are we going to do to find out how many pounds for lime? Dula. Subtract the two, so 6.95 minus 1.75. And when we subtract, we realize that 5.2 or 5.20 pounds are lime. All right, any questions? All right, so